We are live streaming today, so you always have to make sure we got all the technical parts working. There we go. So for those of you who have joined us on YouTube Live, please note that I'm not able to answer questions there. You can post comments and we'll try to address them just a little bit later. My name is Mark. I'm one of the founders of GovDirections and RFP Delivery, and here today to give you a presentation on the request for proposal, the RFP. I get a lot of questions when folks first come to us asking about, really what is an RFP? What am I looking at here? And so I created this class to kind of go through the fundamentals, what you need to watch out for when you are considering a response. After all, the government is asking you as a subject matter expert to reach back to them. And in order to actually write the response, first, I think you need to know what you're responding to and how to dissect that to a point where you can actually move to a win. I just got off the phone, in fact, with one of our customers that we work with, and had just now submitted two and won the second one. And so we're still waiting on the first one, hoping that she wins both of them. But we're just real glad to be able to assist with those. If you do have any questions or need some assistance, give Dale a call in our offices, and she will set you up with this. We do help with both the writing as well as just the general understanding of what you're actually responding to. Sometimes you need a little guidance when you first start out. GovSchool is a service that we at GovDirections started, and we've been doing this now since 1998. We started at GovSchool in about 2012. We learned that our members need a little assistance sometimes, some technical assistance to really go out there to win. So we call this learning to win. First is finding the right RFP, but then knowing how to actually go out there and accomplish the objective of winning the project. I always like to remind you, when you're working in this sector, use this particular quote, it's supposed to be a little hard. If it were easy, everyone would do it. So don't get frustrated. Stick with it. Persistence is really your number one goal when you first start out. I'll just share with you, I've been doing this for a while. Okay, GovDirections has been around for 25 years, but started it as an RFP delivery as the means for us to really learn about RFPs. They really weren't that easy to find back in the 90s and the 80s. And it's become a little bit easier. And even now, everybody's like, gosh, it's just so difficult. And it was really difficult back then. And by the time you learned about something, it was already worded out typically. And so, because it just wasn't instant communication. Now there's instant communication. You're able to submit bids and RFPs online and respond back to them. And so it's become a lot easier than most of you even, I think, but the marketplace is actually also has grown tremendously. Now we're looking at, I used to say a $6 trillion marketplace, just a couple of years ago, it was $4.5 trillion. I think we're really approaching an $8 trillion marketplace. We'll know those statistics. I was looking just yesterday at the state of Georgia, and they're now at a $10 billion surplus. That means basically in reserve that much money, because the economy is just gangbusters, and everyone kind of has been very conservative, rightly so, because we weren't quite sure what was happening. But now state and local governments are flush. Thanks to all of us really pulling together in what's been a difficult period in our history. But it's a huge marketplace, and state and local government it really is the place you want to be, I think, when you're trying to pursue these. The federal government's great, but a lot of the funding is pushed down. The infrastructure funding is pushed down to projects in our communities. As you probably know, in the political game, everybody likes to get credit. And so the more who are involved, all that means it ultimately ends up to a project that's led at the local government level. And so it's for you to understand. We actually try to stay out of the political side of things here at GovDirections, but once a decision has been made and there's going to be funding for it in our project that's really there, we want you to win it. And so it's important that you have the tools to do that. So today, the purpose behind our session is to identify the structure of a request for proposal. And I'm going to walk you through each section and explain the importance. I'm a big believer in experiential learning. So I'm going to fumble around here on the internet. And, a lot of times folks say, okay, Mark, can you expand your screen here? I like to be at this stage of the display for the purposes of being able to really step into the actual documents and so forth. So I don't use a full slide. The slide shows them itself is available to you. And so what I'm going to drop here in the box that you can actually pull up in the chat box are the slides. Okay. And so I have here two titles. One's called the RFP slides, and the other is called the RFP booklet. Okay. And this is a document that I've written to help you organize your thoughts and how you're going to respond to something. Just share with you some knowledge. And I have worked on, right now, probably about 350 projects that I've won over a 30+ year career. And that's required, responding to a significantly higher number than that in order to get that win ratio. So I've got some experience in 34 different states. But the very first one, it really took me about 7 months to grab it. And so it's got to have that persistence when you first start. And then it just gets easier and easier. I use a puzzle sometimes when I'm talking to our membership and explaining things to them, because in the local government, state government, federal marketplace, this is a fragmented system. Information just flowing everywhere. And so you got to get your head around it. And just like you do with a puzzle, you start putting together 1,000 pieces sometimes. But when you start putting together, then it makes sense. And it starts to get easier and easier, and all of a sudden you're done. You don't want to be at that stage where you get to the end and you're missing a couple of pieces. But here, we're not going to allow you to do that. We're going to help you make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm going to use an actual RFP as an example to help you identify. And I'm going to focus in on the sector that I work in. My training at the graduate school and graduate school level and so forth is in human resource management. And as a side job, it used to be my primary work is to go out and actually set up compensation classification systems for local governments. And when I did that, I found that if I would pinpoint my review of RFPs, I would have a higher degree of success. And so I started doing things what I call, I think others too, I'm not sure if I thought of this idea, but using indicators of success. And so if I see these items in an RFP, then I step forward and sort of pursue it. I'm sort of introduce that concept. And I'm going to show you how I use artificial intelligence, AI, chat, GPT, chat, PDF to actually help me respond to an RFP. Because, even here, I'm going to be pulled away probably 3 or 4 times by the time we get finished with this session today. I'm going to stay on here as long as you like. But if you have any questions, start putting them in the chat box. But we all get pulled in different directions as entrepreneurs. And so you kind of have to use some of these tools to your advantage. Whenever you're going through and looking, and you hear me talk about the term RFP, I'm going to start giving you some other terms that you might also see and come across. The first 3 there, request for information, request for qualifications, sources sought. This is whenever the government is actually going out and a process of determining if there's an active marketplace for what they're trying to achieve. I sometimes go into too much detail, but the whole concept developed by Professor Ronald Coase and others in the field of management, is the concept of the theory of the firm. And while we create our firms and while we contract with each other in order to accomplish our objectives, no one in this room today knows everything. Okay, and each of you have your own subject matter expertise, and sometimes it's worthwhile for us, when we need that subject matter expertise, to engage with each other to accomplish that objective. It's more cost effective and efficient for you to do that, and it just makes a lot of sense. And so that's what governments do. And so it doesn't really make sense for them to recreate everything and to do everything internally. And so they contract out constantly. And in fact, it's a strong encouragement in our governing system and the whole concept of home rule and in making decisions locally. Having individuals that are basically in our communities governing us. And so we want that interaction with public and private initiatives. So we use these instruments to govern that. And so the first 3, the request for information, request for qualifications, sources sought, this is when they want to make sure you're qualified. So they have an objective as a government. They're trying to achieve something specifically. They want to purchase an item or spec of some sort. And so they ask the marketplace, can you do this? If you can, tell us about yourself. Okay. And so if you were online yesterday, we talked about capability statements. This is when you're going to use those capability statements. The government themselves will tell you the kind of information they need, but it's going to be somewhat, maybe sometimes formal, but not so in depth about the actual proposal, but more about you as an organization. What is it that you're able to do? And so you have to be able to respond to those, because traditionally, those individual instruments then move into the next stage, which would be more the invitation to quote or the invitation to bid or a request for bid, where they're making that. process, RFB is referred to, or the one I like to respond to, that's the request for proposal. And why do you ask what I like does the best? Because that's when you as a organization can shine, okay? And you're the expert, and you know what needs to be done. The government sometimes doesn't know exactly if that's what they want to do. And so sometimes you're able to step in and it really show yourself and advise and show your knowledge and show why they should hire you. Whereas the invitation to bid or the invitation to quote, typically the specs are tightly drawn, and you're almost always going in there pitching a low rate or a low cost or best quality to win that project. Okay, so in all of these, they're going to be written in such a way that there's going to be the ability of the government to take all of you and then compare you equally. And that's the goal. So they're going to be structured in a specific way. And so I'd like to just to point out, in the request for proposal, the first thing is, the traditional definition. It is a solicitation. Okay, that means that they're actively asking you to respond. So, you call me up on the phone and say, Mark, I look at this and looks like it's a done deal already. Truth of the matter is, no, it's not. There's enough mechanisms for local governments or state agencies or even the federal government to go out and make a procurement decision without ever going through an active RFP. Okay, so they can make those decisions. So when they do, they're asking for a competitive marketplace. So it's made through a bidding process. They're going to give you a method to allow you to actually do that. And it's also important, and I think as a part of this traditional definition, is that to let you know that it is specifically, they're trying to acquire something. It's an agency doing this. So it's a professional relationship, and the agency is trying to accomplish an objective in this process. Okay. And go back here. Sorry, I lost that real quick. Okay. And so when they do, so it's valuable to them. So, and only to say that it's an elaborate decision-making process. Okay, governments don't do these types of purchases lightly. Okay, there's a lot of individuals involved. Sometimes it's multiple years involved in the actual acquisition. Okay, and so that's important that you also take it seriously, because it is considered a valuable asset to them. And so when they're looking out the marketplace, they will potential suppliers who take them seriously and submit business proposals. And that's why one of the most oftentimes I see one of the highest parts of the evaluation is your responsiveness, your ability to understand what they're asking for and respond back to them in a way that they can understand what you're suggesting. Okay, so you have to take it seriously, but just know that these decisions involve a lot of individuals in the process, and so you don't want to go out and take it lightly. Okay, they're not taking it, and you're not going to waste your time responding to it, because almost all of these, sometimes I refer to the RFP as really kind of as a gold certificate. It's going to end up in a contract. You and I can talk about doing business together left and right, and then never go through with anything. It happens in the business prospect. We kind of understand it. But when the government gets to this period of purchase, it's a really high degree of chance that this is going to happen. I think it's very unlikely that it's not going to. Okay, so take it seriously, and when you respond to it, and you're going to have a good shot at winning it. In addition, as we go into this, I'm still letting people into the room. Those of us who are joining us, first of all, as I refresh here, that we are recording this. It will be available to you and at our YouTube live channel immediately after we finish today. There's a slideshow in the actual chat box, as well as a pamphlet that you can download to follow along as well. So those details are there for you, and I encourage you to take advantage of it. So this is an interactive class. Please maintain your mute status as we go into the final other stages of it. If you have a question, put it in the chat box or raise your hand and I'll call on you. But here are the typical parts of an RFP. Okay. And I always, some of you know that I'm a professor and I teach this topic at a university level in a graduate program to future writers of RFPs. And that's these students. And then one of their tasks in order to get out of my class is they have to write an RFP. And so in that process of doing that, I said, well, we take this information and kind of reverse it. I'll teach you what they're supposed to do. So they're supposed to do all of this. Sometimes it's not quite this way. So you might have to go in there and, find some of this information, but each of these components are typically there. I like everything to be structured because, if you don't have organization, you have chaos, and we want everything organized. So with this here, you traditionally will see right away a statement of work. Okay. This should be in a few sentences, maybe a paragraph at the most, but it's something that should really be clear. I teach them the ABCs: accuracy, brevity, and clarity. Okay, it should be accurate, exactly what they need. It should be brief, and it should be clear to you, so there's no questions. And not only that, whenever you read that statement of work, you should be really quickly get this song in your head. Okay, and this is the one. You're the one that I wanted to find. Okay, and it's a Coldplay song. It's one of my favorite songs. But whenever you read as a potential supplier the statement of work, if it doesn't sing that song, move along. Okay, there's 5,000 new calls for visit proposals every day. You'll find one that matches you. Don't waste your time on trying to make it fit your company. It doesn't work that way. Okay, that will actually potentially just cause you a lot of heartbreak and wasted time. Second, technical specs. Okay, that's when you're going to start to get into the meat of the project. Okay, along with the schedule, when they're hoping you can accomplish that, and the deliverables. Okay, and each of those sort of their own sections, and I'll spend some time on that. Now, the technical specs, this is what the government's traditionally trying to accomplish. And usually it's in an ordered process, and you're going to want to sit down and actually walk through each of those and make sure that you can provide this. Oftentimes, we can't do 100% of the technical spec. Okay, and if that's the case, there's no reason to walk away from that project. Okay, you get a high degree, you're good. Okay, this is where you might need to reach out to others who can help you with that. Okay, but it's likely that if you can't meet it, then somebody else can't meet it as well. And so don't walk away from it, but always speak to every single request or every specific a technical part of it that the government's asked you to speak to. Never leave it unanswered. So if you can't do it, you tell them you can't do it. Or if you have an alternative, bring it in and use some subcontracting. It's very common for companies of yours, it's new to business, to go in and actually subcontract this or use 1099 workers who have a specialty in a particular area. In addition, they're going to give you a schedule that you're going to try to achieve. Now here, you do need to pay attention to it. There's really two sides of the schedule. One is the schedule to actually respond back to the RFP. The other is to actually complete the deliverables. Okay, so if they want you there for a year or 2 years, make sure that you can meet that. Don't enter into a contract that you just can't meet. It'll leave you with a bad reputation. You don't want to have that happen. On the other side of it is the actual schedule of completion of the information. Now, sometimes you're going to get 30 days, 60 days. One other day I had one with 90 days. And literally I took all the time that was available to complete it, still sent it in a day before. But at the same time, I'm just helping this client I'm working with. We got it turned around one by Monday. We got it all ready to go. We got a Google Drive with all the documents set up. We've set it up in an organized way for our client, and everything's there. They've already got the capability statement done. They've already got the executive summary done. They've already got the deliverables spoke to, in particular ones, and we've collected them over time, because this is not something that you actually hear brand new each time. It's usually the same thing in your field. So just know that whenever you're looking at the schedule, that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. Okay, if you got 2 days, you'll get it done in 2 days if you're organized. If you got 2 months, take that full 2 months. Okay, and so that's important that you actually are able to do that. So use the schedule to your advantage. Okay, jumping around here, 1 second. Okay, and then the next is going to be your contract terms and conditions. As a part of the deliverables, which they're also typically in an organized way. And I always tell our clients, whenever you respond, always use the same organization. Use the same ordered process. It's just the better. That way the government's not stepping around trying to find to see if you can meet something, because the first person you really are trying to get past is the procurement officer, and they really are going through a checklist. Oftentimes they'll give you the exact same checklist that you need to use, and then make sure that you've done everything, and they're just going to confirm that before they send you off to the actual decision makers. And that's going to be individuals who are taking a look at your actual proposal. Okay, as a part of that, if you can't do something in deliverable, you need to let them know. Don't ever leave things unanswered. Same thing with the technical specs. But you're also probably building your costing as a part of that, because that can be a part of your profit, knowing when you have to do something. If I have to do something within 3 weeks of the actual award, and it's traditionally 3 months, well, certainly I can sometimes do that, but it's going to cost them twice as much, or 3 times as much. And so that's a part of your pricing mechanism that you want to go in there and look at that. In addition, I will use my deliverables as well as the technical specs as some of those indicators of success. So if somebody's coming in with an unreasonable time deadline, then I'm probably going to walk away from that because they really don't know what they're really asking, and it's probably not going to be a successful bid on my part. So it's a waste of my time. Okay, and so I use some of those indicators to determine whether or not I'm going to pursue something. In addition, the contract terms and conditions. This is a part they generally will provide that into your RFP that you're looking at. Sometimes it'll be built around those deliverables, those technical specs. Others are going to have a lot of rules and regs that the government itself is going to ask you to respond to. This is really your true profit center. So you got to make sure that you can do everything they ask. And if something doesn't happen, the concept of basically forbearance, how do you get out of this if there's a breakdown of failure in our ability to work with each other? Okay, understand what that means. Okay, because no one ever expected this thing called the pandemic, and a lot of us were left holding the bag with some of these contracts. And you have a lot of money involved, and then you need to know really how the government intends to get you through that part of the process. The best thing about government RFPs is, as opposed to me just calling you and say, "Hey, I want to do business with you." Here, they're going to tell you how do you approach them? What is the format of your proposal? Okay, how does it want to do? Because they've got to get an apple-to-apple comparison as best as possible. So they're going to govern that process tightly. And so you need to read through that, understand it. So if they say they want 10 copies, then they need 10 copies. Okay, not 11, not 8. Okay, give them 10. Make sure you pay attention to these. If they want this section in a particular part and this other section, it doesn't matter that you got the perfect response that you've already done in a different format. Okay, you got to take that format and redo it so it meets the format of the proposal for that individual government. Don't give extra. Don't be creative in this process unless they tell you to. Okay, governments are looking for at this point in time one thing: can you follow directions? Can you be responsive to their goals and their objectives? Okay, and so pay attention to that. So that's so important. The other part is your qualification and experience. Right now, you should have that defined. If I ask each of you, I popped on here right now and tell me your qualifications, tell me your experience. You should be able to tell me that in a very quick format. Almost I call this the grocery store challenge. Okay, tell me, a paragraph, who you are, what you do, why are you doing what you do, and for goodness sakes, don't worry about it. If they want, they want you to have 10 past governments that you work with and you're brand new. Of course, they know that you don't have that kind of record within your company. They're okay with that. You give them the experience that you have. They can give you the ideal situation. Then you got to sell yourself. So you take what you can, what parts of your past that you can use for the qualification experience, and you sell yourself. Because if you don't sell yourself, no one else. I don't have this quote on here, but there's a good quote I always like to use from Alexander Haig, who's a general under President Reagan. But basically, he says, if you don't define yourself, somebody else will define you. And if that happens, believe me, it's not going to be to your benefit. Okay, because you're looking, it's competition, and you need to state your capabilities and then exceed them whenever you go in and actually work with someone. And so understand that. Okay, and then cost breakdown. The government will show you how they want you to break down the cost, as in what kind of percentage of that is part of the evaluation criteria. Truthfully, most governments used only, as before RFPs, the cost is typically a small percentage and almost always in a negotiated format once you get past the door. Almost the number one thing I always say, the one that gets the most point, is your ability to understand what they're asking for and then to provide them a response back to that part. Okay, and then cost will always be the final potential final factor, but it's almost always in a small percentage. And so don't feel like you have to go in there, not like the invitation to bid where it's low cost and you got to really sharpen your pencil. Here, they want you to be in an engaged situation where first you're not taking advantage of them. Okay, that's not going to happen. But in an engaged situation where you're making profit, that you're happy, that you're able to accomplish your objective, they're going to pay you for your subject matter expertise. So you approach the RFP in a different way than you would a traditional invitation to bid. And they'll always tell you how they're going to evaluate you. That's another great thing about governance. They're going to go ahead and lay it out. So if you know how you're going to be evaluated, make sure you use that to your advantage. I know I always give the first question I get whenever I teach graduate classes: what is the rubric? What is the scoring rubric? What do I have to do? Because Some of them will go out and go ahead and do everything so they can get that 100. I always step back and say, listen, you got an A, don't worry about it. Let's focus in on how to learn. But here, in this case here, focus in on how you can get that 100%. So they tell you how it's going to be broken down, then you do that. And no, there's no fancy school evaluation. These are typically lay workers who have been charged with the task of evaluating you compared to somebody else. So if you take, 5 or 6 people in your office or your friend group or your acquaintance group and then ask them to evaluate your proposal, you'll get a pretty good comparative number so you'll know where you're at. Okay, so you can do that if you can. You got time, have some folks sit down and evaluate your response back to them. Okay, just as a reminder, make sure it says you're the one that I wanted to find. Okay, if it doesn't, move along. Work expands, so it's fill the time available for completion. You're never going to have enough time, and sometimes you're going to have too much time. Okay, so it's just whatever it is, use it efficiently. Okay, tips: read the entire proposal. And then start with that scope of work. Then you've got these other sections. If the scope of work doesn't meet you can step out, move on. If you're interested, then read the whole thing. Okay, make sure there's not something that gets you near the end. Okay, and then pay attention to those areas that we discussed here today. Okay, those parts. Okay, and then set it aside, think about it, talk to your colleagues, really make sure you're a good fit. You got 2 hours to do that, do that, and take that analysis in 2 hours. You got 2 weeks, take the 2 weeks. Okay, just take your time, don't rush it. Then complete the proposal in one setting. Okay, when I write the RFP, I usually do for our clients, I lay it out. We use a Google Drive. They can watch as we go along, and we're going through one by one each section and filling it out there for you. And then the only source of knowledge really is experience. So let's go out there and take a look at an RFP. I went through it earlier, and if you come to our site and you go into, let me just start from the beginning. For that one to find something there, I always go in each day. I'm getting an alert. My alert is built on my settings. My settings are at my dashboard, my account. So when I log in, it's always going to come to it first. And you can do that and set those there. But I like to always use the keyword and always know, you can come back in and do some filtering and you always store those filters that are right there. But I'd like to always first start with just a keyword without any filters. And don't do it both together. It doesn't really work for you. I think that's an issue. So I go in and I do a Boolean search technique, 2 words together. It'll search, come in if I wanted it to do, and maybe expansive or limiting with the conjunction of and. This allows me to really go in and find the bids that I'm seeking. Once I find the keywords that really fit me, then I can go back and I'm gonna try some different ones, but I'm always going to save those keywords right there. I don't have to run it again. So I go in and I do a compensation study and a couple of them pop up right away. And here I am in Georgia and there's one that's available in South Carolina. Okay. And so that caught my attention this morning. And I went in there and let's just clarify, this is going to show me the state, going to show me the due dates, due July 31st. I got about 2 weeks. It's a state and local bid. Okay. If it was a federal, say federal there, I could share it with somebody in my office if I'm interested in email and make sure they see it. But I'm going to step into it and read some more. When I open that up, it's going to tell me some additional details. In this particular case, it's going to tell me that it's for Clemson, South Carolina. Oh my goodness. This is for the city of Clemson, a nice town where the University of Clemson's at. And real close by, within an hour and a half of where I live at, maybe 2 hours. And real close to where I like to be efficient. So that would be some indicators that I use for success. So make sure your indicators that you use are more than just numbers and not fun and things like that. Enjoy your work. Where's it at? This is that's a part of what I do. I want to work where I like being as well. And not only that, but sometimes I want to go in there and I'm going to go in and check the city council, see if they're working together. If there's a lot of 5-4 votes or 4-3 votes and they're fighting all the time, I don't want to really work with them because these are going to things that really push up your cost. And it's just not really worthwhile unless they were hiring me to come in and be a mediator of some sort. No, but you want to have good places to work. Okay. If there was a reference we posted here, but a summary, I can go back and I can download it so I don't lose it. Also can capture it because I'm interested in this bid. So I'm going to capture it. I'm going to save it in my folder, the captured phrase right there. And if I can go back and view it later so I don't have to go ahead and do that search again. Okay, but here it is. It's something I'm interested. I'm going to leave RFP delivery and go directly to the city of Clemson. Here's the document. They'll give me a summary for me to read through beforehand, and I'm going to capture some basic information. They actually have a time deadline for the questions. I'm going to be aware of that going into it. Okay. Tracy Taylor is my contact, or Allison Gant. I'm not going to go outside those individuals. I may, in fact, I think I may know the mayor there. I'm not going to call the mayor. Okay. Not going to call bother. Not going to disqualify myself. This is an active contract. Do what they tell you. Does they download it? So I downloaded it. Okay. And here it is on the downloaded on my, here we go. And if somebody just give me a thumbs up, they can see the RFP. That's good. And it's there. And so here it's showing me there's a deadline for submission. So here's the document. Going to have their logo on it for all of you. Let me just double check. I don't see any thumbs up. Everybody can see City of Clemson RFP, correct? Yes, I see a thumb up. Okay. So they're going to give me all right in the first page. They're going to give me some key parts that I want. That's because they don't want me to forget. First is the deadline. Got to get it there by that date. They're not going to make any exceptions for me as much as I would like for them to. They're not going to. They got to have that information in by that date. Okay. They gave me the address and they're going to tell me some more information as I go into. First, they're going to share that advertisement. I'm going to read through that. This is what I saw on that one page there as well. Probably in a newspaper somewhere too. Other people are reading this. In this case here, they're going to give me some basic information and not necessarily the scope, but just a general announcement. Okay. In essence, it's not really the RFP, but it's telling me that the RFP is out there. Okay. So capture that piece of information, start watching for contact information, some deadlines, some dates. At this point in time, I may have went to the city's website and started looking for something. They, a lot of times they'll go in and say, hey, we are a great place to be. Here's some information about us. We're a small town, 7.5 square miles, got 17,000 residents. These are going to, once again, be part of my indicators. I'm going to have I have about 20 of them, in fact. Now I'm putting in there, if I get a good match, about 75%, then I'll pursue this. And I can already tell you that I'm going to get 75% of this one. It's that high of chance. And whenever I get that much, I've got a pretty good shot at winning it. Okay. And you will too. You'll know what it really takes to win by monitoring those indicators based on your past performance and keeping them there. Okay. And where it's located, details, capture some of that detail. Okay. The scope, here's the scope. I'm going to read through it. Okay. And basically this first line is the main part. And this seems to be, this is exactly what I do. This really was one that I needed to find. I like Clemson, and it's going to be football season probably when I'm working up there. I can go up there. It's in the fall. It's a great place in South Carolina. Just a good place. So these are all things that I'm watching out for. In the scope, they're going to list all the particular specs, more or less. Maybe call this some of the deliverables in the process of what they want you to accomplish. And notice they did order it A, B, C, D, E, F. So whenever I submit back to them, I'm going to respond back to them and address all of these items, and I'm going to order it in the exact same way that they've listed it. It just makes a lot more sense. It's going to be easier for the person who's evaluating it to make sure I caught what they did. And I'm going to get 100% on responsiveness because I'm going to respond back exactly the way they asked me to. That's such an easy part to capture those points. And it's almost always the highest part. Okay. So the folks who can't follow instructions, they don't want to work with. That's how they get you. They cross you out. Okay. And so the first thing is to follow the instructions. So they're going to tell me how to submit it. They want me to do a cover letter. In that letter, I'm going to talk about these items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And believe me, I'm not going to start with my references. I'm not going to start with my minimum qualifications. I'm going to start with my profile. Okay. My cover letter is going to start with the profile, go into the understanding, talk about the budget, talk about the schedule, talk about the minimum quals, I'm not giving the proposal here, but in a cover letter, short and sweet. Okay. As short as I can make it, non-repetitive, also not using words. One of the exercises I always made my children do as I taught them to write is to go through each sentence and strike out every word that's a duplicate, and then go back and strike out every word you don't need in the sentence. Okay, these are just basic, if you need to go back and get Skunk's book, it's called Elements of Style. It shows you how to write technically. And that's what you need to do in business setting. And they don't want all the superfluous and all the, you're great. Sure you are. Okay. They don't need all that. Okay. They want what they've asked for in the document. Okay. Remember that in your writing skills. They also tell me how they want me to deliver it. And they want it delivered by 2 p.m. on July 31st. I can't get there at 2:01. Even right now, I know some of you are doing other things, but as soon as it gets at 2 o'clock, I'm gonna get a whole group of people trying to get in here because they think it's 1 o'clock. And so it happens. And so be aware of the time that it is locally there. I did this the other day with a contract in Arizona, and they don't do daylight savings times. I didn't know that. man, how am I supposed to know? And we do in Georgia, so I was off a whole hour. Unfortunately, I was an hour ahead, so that was a good thing. And actually, I mean, I had an extra hour, so I added to it. But know that you got to do that research. They're telling you they expect you to do that. They're not going to hold your hand, okay? And so after that date, at that time, they're not going to be able to respond. Here's how they're going to evaluate you. Quality and completeness of proposal. There it is. That's the number one goal. They've labeled it number one. That's where they will give most of the points at. Your qualifications, number two. Third is the cost. And then fourth is your approach and your methodology. So I'm going to pay attention to that and how I respond to them. I'm also going to go out there and do some research, see when the last time they did this, how much they paid for it last time. My type work, they don't do this very often. So it's maybe every 4 to 8 years, maybe even longer. So I can't really use that sometimes as the number that I'm going to respond with, but I can use it to know where they were at in the past, comparatively speaking, when I was also in that time frame. So you're going to use some of that data analytics to get to your pricing to make sure. And then you're going to have some standard forms that you have, that we all have, okay? Once you do these, you can save them, put them in your Google Drive, and you don't have to keep redoing this. Look how easy this RFP was, okay? They're not looking for anything too formal at all. And when they do this, it's going to be probably, about an 8-page document that I'm going to respond back with, if that. And I'm going to have a real high degree of chance of winning it. Okay, so don't let the RFP, as I said earlier, it's supposed to be hard. Okay, this isn't even that. I don't think it's too hard. Once you get it done, you have it there, and you can use it in the future as you go forward. But it's straight right there. It's easy enough to do. And so here we are at 1:40. I would like to stop, see if you've got any questions. As I do that, I'm going to stop our YouTube Live. Thank you for joining us on YouTube Live. We try to keep this particular session around 30 minutes. I'm sorry I kept you to a little bit longer, but if you do have questions, you can type them in the chat box now on our Zoom channel, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. Any questions today?